It's time to cook with Susan Beck, and I'm out in my garden again today, sitting here with my asparagus behind me and my rhubarb in front of me. I have 3 rhubarb plants that I put in the ground about 4 years ago, and this is the first year that I have just gotten a tremendous crop of rhubarb, and it felt like I could pick all the way until July. It's kind of recommended that by maybe the 4th of July you quit pulling your rhubarb and let it rest so that it gets ready for the next season. That's the case with this asparagus too. If you'd like to learn more about asparagus, I posted a video back in May, and I'll put the link below that you can see some recipes and information on how to plant and harvest asparagus. But back to our rhubarb. Most recipes call for 3 to 4 cups of rhubarb. So that means I'm going to probably pull between 7 and 10 stalks of rhubarb if they're the good thick ones. This is a little late in the season. Mine are a little spindlier, so I'm going to need to pull more rhubarb than that to have enough to make rhubarb cake today. I simply reach down to the base of my rhubarb and give a pull from the bottom. So when I do that, I end up with this kind of shiny stalk here and a poisonous leaf on the top. So I simply cut here, and everything between my hands can be diced up to make a rhubarb pie, rhubarb sauce, rhubarb cake, rhubarb crisp. Lots of great things you can make with this rhubarb. Today I'm going to make a rhubarb cake. I got this recipe from my mother, who got it from my grandmother, and it has been passed down through the generations. So out in the garden, we pulled our rhubarb from the plant like this, and we removed the top stems. We do not need that part. We also want to probably remove a little bit from the bottom. So I have been cutting up my rhubarb. I have 2 cups in this container. I need to have a total of 3 cups. So I'm going to finish dicing my rhubarb, cutting it into fairly small pieces. Maybe a ½ centimeter in width. Alright, that should come about perfect. Alright, probably a little more than a cup there, but that's alright. Oops, you can't really see that very well. So I'm not too worried if that's a little overflowing, and into my rhubarb container that goes for 3 cups of rhubarb. Let's see what else we need for this recipe today. Today we will be using 1 stick of margarine or a ½ cup of some type of shortening. I have done this with Crisco and that type of shortening as well. We have our 3 cups of rhubarb, 1 egg, 1½ cups of sugar, a ½ teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 cups of flour plus 2 tablespoons of flour, which I already have measured in the bowl, 1 cup of milk, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. That's for the cake. And then on the topping, we will use a 1/3 cup of sugar, a ½ cup of nuts. I'm using walnuts today, but pecans work nicely also, and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Now, while we're getting all of this mixed together, the oven will be preheating at 350 degrees. When making a batter for cakes or cookies, I always want to cream my shortening, whatever kind of margarine or butter I would be using, with my sugar. So I'm going to put that softened margarine into my bowl. I had put this into the microwave for 30 seconds to soften it up a little bit. The best way to do this is to leave your stick of margarine sit on the counter for an hour or so until it gets soft. Alright, we're going to add in that 1½ cups of sugar. Raise up our handle first there. Okay, and turn this on to cream it together. We want to cream this until our sugar and our butter are well mixed together and we don't see separate little pieces of sugar grains in there. That's called creaming. Our next step will be to add our egg into there. I'm just going to break it into my margarine container to be sure I don't get any shell. And in goes my egg, and I want to make sure this part is well whipped together too. Okay, the next part part becomes a little interesting. Sometimes you see this in cake recipes, and you do this so that you don't overbeat it and end up with tough batter, and you want everything to mix well. So it is recommended that you take your dry ingredients and put part of them in, followed by some liquid, followed by some dry, some liquid, and ending with dry ingredients again. So again, this is to keep the cake from being tough. So right into my flour bowl, I'm going to put my teaspoon of baking soda and my half a teaspoon of salt, and I'm just going to kind of mix those together. Again, I'm not going to bother to sift this, but it's somewhat incorporated. So I am going to put in about 1/3 of my dry ingredients. Just eyeballing it is good enough, and we will mix in that much of it. While that's going, I am going to add to my milk 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Now this recipe called for sour milk. Sour milk? Oh, sour milk kind of scares me. I'm not really one to want to know if my milk is sour. I hope by the time it's sour it is long gone or it has been poured down the drain. So my solution to making sour milk is to take my 2 cups of milk and add 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. So I'm going to add about half of that liquid to my cake mix. I don't want to turn that on real high because my liquid will start flying out on me. Plus I'm going to just pour my next round of dry ingredients right into there. Alright, once it looks like most of that flour is mixed in, I'm going to add in the rest of my liquid, followed by the last 1/3 of dry ingredients. Now I don't want this to be real over mixed, so I'm going to stop for a moment and make sure everything is incorporating and not just stuck on the bottom of the bowl. Flour up there on those. Alright, one more small amount of time with the beater. And we're going to call that good because, again, remember, we do not want to overbeat our cake. All right. Put this in here and get it out of our way. The last step is to add the rhubarb, and we are going to fold that in. Now, folding is when you take your spatula and just kind of gently flip the batter over the rhubarb pieces to make sure there's some rhubarb in every scoop. So here's a look at our batter. This is ready to be poured into a greased 9x13 pan. Alright, let's give our 9x13 pan a quick spray and add our cake batter to it. Now we'll be adding a topping to this of cinnamon and nuts and sugar. I am going to use my nut chopper to chop up my walnuts a little bit more. These were chopped walnuts in the package, but I'm going to make them a little smaller. Makes it a little more likely that I get some nuts over the entire cake. And I just sprinkle this 1/2 cup on. Again, walnuts, pecans, any kind of nuts. You could even use almonds on this if you wanted to. Alright, we're supposed to use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, so I'm just going to kind of scatter that around. And 1/3 cup of granulated white sugar. Just gives it a nice crispy little crunch on the top. Kind of like when you buy muffins and they have those big granulated sugar pieces on the top when you buy them in a store. So our cake is now going to go into our 350-degree oven for 45 minutes. While the rhubarb cake has been cooking in the oven, I decided I would get a freezer bag ready of rhubarb so that I can make a rhubarb crisper rhubarb cake again this winter. So the rhubarb that you pick, just simply cut it up just like you would for the rhubarb cake when we put it into our mixing bowl a little bit ago. And I like to clearly mark, like this one says 3 cups, 3 or 4 cups. Go into your bag. That way it's already pre-measured for your recipes. Using just a Ziploc, if you don't have a vacuum sealer, will work just fine. Just try to squeeze out as much of the air as possible. Anywhere from 3 to 4 cups is a good amount to freeze. You know, recipes tend to call for that amount, and if you're a little on the short side or a little on the heavy side, it's really okay. The other thing I did while my cake was cooking was to whip up some whipping cream. Just a cup of heavy whipping cream mixed in with 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar. Whip it on high until it becomes nice and thick and no longer looks like runny milk. In fact, you can see it sticks right to my beaters. I have a video I will post below on how to make homemade whipping cream as well. Well, let's see how that cake is doing. Oh, look at that delicious looking rhubarb cake. I just love the crustiness that you get on the top, yet this cake will be very moist inside. I'm going to let it cool for a little bit before we cut it. Let's give this cake a taste. First, let's add a little dollop of whipped topping to the top of that and give it a bite. I can see the rhubarb in there. And I really like the tartness of this cake. I'm not really into super sweet desserts, and I really like things like rhubarb because yes, there's a sweetness within the cake, but that rhubarb just kind of counters that. And that crispiness on the top from where it's baked, along with the crunch of the nuts, is just a perfect, perfect dessert. Or even a coffee cake. Enjoy.